Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode at a time. We're now on episode 18 of season 7. This is the plan. This is the famous episode involving the messed up wedding invitations, thanks to a plan by Raymond. And of course, this is written by Tucker Cawley, and you can tell from this type of situation and how the characters react, this has his fingerprints all over it, especially if you've been watching from the beginning of this show. I'll just get with the trivia at the beginning just to get it out of the way. Georgia and Fred, Hank and Pat's actors, do not appear in the syndicated version of this episode, which I kind of forgot about, but watching it again, I'm like, I have vague memories of it ending right here, but then I saw it, I'm like, oh yeah, this probably was cut out in syndication. And lo and behold, IMDb came to my rescue, and they don't. And I could see why, because it's a funny scene, but it's not really one that's necessary for syndication when you have to cut stuff for pacing. Plus, it's not really a scene that later on is referenced again. It's just a funny little one. Hank, they're nudists! Which, if you haven't seen the episode and you're wondering what that's about, you're about to find out. Now, obviously, since they're getting married, both parties are going to be involved in stuff. And Robert got the wedding invitation. And he's got to get the designs, paper choices, what to put on it down. And he's showing it to Ray and Frank. And they're like, oh, man, what are you getting involved in this stuff for? And as Robert puts it, it is important that I be involved in the wedding planning experience. Now, they do make fun of him a little bit at this point, especially because of how he worded it. It's so verbatim, it sounds like he remembered what Amy said and is just repeating it back verbatim like a parrot. Which you kind of get it, but sometimes it's easy to remember it that way. But Robert has a point. It is their wedding, even though they make fun of him for saying it that way, which I'll get to that in a second. It is their wedding, and as such, he should have a hand in planning part of it. Which, of course, is the complete opposite from how we saw Ray and Deborah's wedding handled, which, keep that thought in mind, I'll get to it in a second. Now, they make fun of Robert for saying it's their wedding, and he should have a hand in it. And they're like, the wedding is for the woman. Which, watching this episode, I'm like, that's one part of this episode that hasn't aged well. Their whole logic for why he should not be involved in it. And I'd say it's probably a little misogynist to think it's all just what the wife wants, because it is their wedding. They both should get a say in what goes on in the wedding. Who's invited, how big it is, and all that. And both should be doing stuff. To say it's all just for the wife, it's just a show for them, and all you get is just the post-nuptial benefits and then the ring on your finger. No. He doesn't quite put it that way, but that's what he's implying. Or at least that's how I read into what he's implying with it. It's like, yeah, no. You both should have a say in it. But to tie into the humor of the episode and how Ray manages to talk Robert into doing what he ends up doing, Robert mentions how when talking with Amy about what they want to do, how he wanted a winter wedding for the heat. He wanted a small ceremony because he didn't want to be around busboys and servers, and it turns out that he got the reverse of what he wanted. Now, we obviously don't see the conversation, so we don't know if Amy steamrolled over him or they talked about it and she wore him down. It's hard to tell. But you can see with that how he's like, yeah, it is kind of for the woman. So, Ray goes over something that happened with his and Deborah's wedding. Something that's never mentioned in that episode back in season 2, but with how we see that wedding planning go in between the jump from the beginning of the wedding planning to the actual wedding, it's believable. And that is that he was given the job of finding the music for the wedding. He found a DJ. She turned up, she wanted a band. He found one, she didn't like it. He found another, she didn't like it. So he found this one-man wedding band named Zipper in the subway, had him audition, she didn't like it, and then she's like, all right, I'll do it. She found a kick-ass band, and as he puts it, I sat in front of the television and never looked back. So their whole plan is to sabotage it because Amy wants to do it, but she doesn't want to tell you directly she wants to do everything, which is a pretty lazy way to look at things, but given how far into the show we are we really surprised that Ray's logic is that? And hold that in mind, because as we get through the episode, that'll pop up again. So they decide they're going to sabotage these wedding invitations. Now to cut on back, though, I almost jumped ahead of the other point. With what we saw happen in Season 2, that whole thing, even though nothing's ever mentioned of it in that episode, it is plausible because of the end of the first part of that. And that is, Ray wanted a small wedding, he wanted only a handful of people, and he got laughed off by Deborah and her parents. Like, that's not a wedding, that's a barbecue. No, that is a small wedding. And you forget it's not your wedding, it's not your wedding as in singular, it's your wedding plural. Deborah forgot that, and she decided that it was more important what she wanted than what they as a couple wanted. That's the thing. I believe I made this point back in that episode, is that when you're doing a marriage, it's about compromise, it's about communication, and for the ceremony itself, it's about getting the best of what you want. You give your ideas, and you have to find the happy medium with it. Now, with Ray and Deborah, it seemed to be more what Deborah wanted, and not so much what Ray wanted, based on what we see in the episode. And because of that, and Ray not being allowed to do anything, the one little bit of power he gets to exercise, nothing. Now, of course, we see in subsequent seasons, whenever he's given a little bit of power, he'll mess stuff up, like we saw in the Tissues episode, we saw in other stuff. But with that, he directly sabotaged it. So it makes you wonder if some of the other stuff he sabotaged, or if he just wanted to whine just for whining. But of course, we know, and sometimes he has a good point, like Tissues not wanting to take the kids out to eat. Probably because of his memories of Jeffrey trying to ride a goose. Now, back onto the wedding invitations. They decide that they are going to sabotage the wording. Like, this is where we get Hank in pat, like shake in bake, pork in beans. And the plan was, do the writing crappy like that, and then send it to the wedding person to look at and give the final way of how it would look, and then send it to Amy to have a look at, and then decide whether to send them out or redo it. Now, funny thing is, in the blooper reel, there's a fun little moment there where they're having fun with it. And, Frank goes and makes some popcorn, and Robert's doing a bunch of other ones. And one of the ad-libs that Brad Garrett does is like, oh my god. If this was on HBO, that would have made the cut and that would have fit, but since it's for network television, he's just doing that to get the audience to laugh. Tits ass. Like, oh man, he took the opportunity and he ran with it there. I gotta give him an applause for that. Now, obviously, in order for this episode to continue with its humor, something has to go awry. And what goes awry is that the wedding coordinator, instead of sending it to Amy, she sent the invitations out as is. Don't jump ahead of me with the laughter. So there's the humor, where Amy is frantic and they're all reading it over, and they read over what they put. Of course, the Hank in pat. Amy's reaction to that is hilarious. In pat? They're not hillbillies, Robert. They got the date wrong. My favorite thing, though, is attire optional instead of black tie optional. Amy's reaction to this is so fun. There's going to be naked people at the church on a Wednesday. Of course. And all three of the Barone women are in there before it's revealed what happened. And as expected, Deborah and Maria are like, so what's going on? And Robert does try to give a abridged version of what happened. And when they all find out, they're like, oh. So Amy leaves to go try to fix it. Marie goes across the street to deal with Frank. Robert wants to hang out, but one look from Deborah tells him probably not a good idea, so he skedaddles. Now, Ray shows up, and Deborah does a thing where she plays it off as nonchalant until the right moment. And he looks at the wedding invitation because it came in the mail, and he tries to play it off like, oh, wow. And it's so over the top that even if Deborah had not seen it already, she would have known something was up because of how over the top Ray is trying to go with it. And what makes this funny is that Ray is doing this still none the wiser. When it cuts to Deborah, she's just looking at him like, really, Ray? And we, the audience, since we already know she knows, this is what the contrast between it. It's a nice little foil moment. And then when Ray finally gets called out by her, he's like, "No, you didn't see it. I saw it earlier." And Ray does try to explain to Deborah why they did it, and Deborah realizes it's Zipper, that whole thing. And she tries to call him out, like, "Have you been faking everything? How come you cannot fold?" It's a little embarrassing, which that'd have to go at Ray. Some people just can't fold right, or you got to find the right method to fold, and for Ray, that seems to be it. The diaper thing, the few you change, you didn't do them right, and Ray blames it on the kids, which, maybe, but also probably just didn't get the hang of it. Now, when it cuts to the next big moment, we see the men are all being, I like a better phrase, controlled by their wives, or in Robert's case, also his mother, where he's walked across to show Deborah the bridesmaid choices, and when he tells Marie, "I can do this on my own," and she's like, "We'll decide what you can do." Like, really, Marie? I probably would have put my foot down on that and then just put him on the table and walked out of the house and be like, "Stop following me." And of course, Frank, he just kind of accepts some of it, like, years, I had a good run. And the fun thing is that even though Marie babies Ray, this is one of the few times where she sides with the other members of the family, like the episode where she slapped Ray across the face because of him starting to sound like Frank. Here, she's like, "Because it's not enough." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Marie, go side with it." Now the fun thing with this is as they're going back and forth about all this, Ray hits a realization, and that is that he's not the only one who occasionally has been doing weaponized incompetence, which I know some of you are probably thinking that, but that is what that is. In case you're wondering what weaponized incompetence is, it is when you pretend to be able to do something to get out of doing it. Now, in Ray's case with the wedding, you could say it's justifiable weaponized incompetence, but anything he's done since then, which his statement earlier in the episode implied, shows that he knows what he was doing and he did it just to get out of work. Robert's probably hasn't done that much of it. Frank's probably done some of it. So he doesn't want to go with it. And then, of course, Ray realizes he's not the only one who's been doing that. And that was because he brings up the fact that, the counterpoint of fact where Deborah's like, "The only time you ever call me is when you need me to tape things for you. Not things, games I need to watch for work." And he points out that she never does it right. It's like, if I can do it. Which I just love with that. He's saying that if someone as stupid as me could do it, someone like you could. And he realizes that she's faking it. Which I get. Because I'll put it this way. My late grandmother, she was not the most tech savvy in certain aspects of technology. I mean, she got certain things okay, like how to download an app onto your phone, how to set up autopay and all that. But another thing, she wasn't the most tech savvy. But she knew how to set up a VCR recording thing. So, if anyone can set up a VHS recording thing, it should be somebody in that age group or younger. And Deborah should be able to do it. So for that, she's definitely doing weaponized incompetence. When she should know if it's a sport-related thing, that means Ray needs to watch it for work. So doing that is intentionally trying to sabotage his career. Now, the one that Frank brings up is just, okay, that's so Frank and Marie. I'm starting to think you could shovel the driveway. It goes into a little thing like that, and they're trying to fight back. Now, Robert and Amy do make up in this. It's like, yeah, they're just wedding invitations. It's not what really matters. Now, Deborah and Marie try to get on them about it, being like, "You have a right to be mad at him." And Amy's little speech here is very good. Now, if you've been married for ages, you could say it's a little naive, which that's the point, but there's a difference between being naive and thinking like, yeah, you should not be fully angry at it over something minor. If it was something major, I get, like a kid that you didn't really want at the wedding in the first place goes over to the wedding cake and pushes off the thing just because he didn't get to cut it. That's something worth getting angry for. The wedding invitation thing, not so much, other than maybe some of the initial reactions from the family members. Like her Aunt Lynn, who was the one that tipped her off, and of course later on, "Hank, they're nudists!" That type of thing. Now, as they leave, of course, they're all like, "Oh, you remember when we were that stupid?" Kind of, but I don't think you're that stupid. You just have been married for a long time, so seeing that young love is a little, well, I don't know if I'd say young. Well, I don't think young love's probably the right way to describe shit. fresh, about to be newlywed love, I think is the best way to describe it. And we're going to see Robert and Amy still have that a little bit at the beginning of the next season, so hold that in mind. And then it's going to age a little bit throughout it into a more mature love. But it's like fresh, mature love at this point, if you get it. And then, of course, after this, once it ends, that's when it goes into the thing I mentioned earlier. They're nudists! But that whole scene, I think, is more the perfect way to end it. And then that last one is just extra one. All in all, this is a very fun scenario. Another little nice move forward for the Robert-Amy dynamic. Now, earlier on in the show and in the relationship thing, I think this probably could have ended with them breaking up again, especially season 4 with the ridiculous reasons Amy broke up with Robert around that time, like not proposing at her birthday, which is like, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid reason to break up with somebody, but oh well. And then, of course, the whole thing we find out about the relationships, a little bit of a peek back in between the season 2 episode, and just all the backs and forth. It, like I said, it has Collie's fingerprints all over it, and then the actors, especially with how well their chemistry is developed by this point in the show's run, it really makes the comedy and the timing of the deliveries all spot on. It makes for another fun one. Another episode that's definitely on the VHS list. And like I mentioned, I believe at the end of the last episode review, if you're going to only watch 4 episodes of the Amy Robert thing, and that's 4 counting the wedding, I believe it's a double one. Yeah, it counts the marriage one actually as, even though it's 2 episodes, it counts it as 1 long episode. And that's really all I have to say about this. There's not much other trivia, no deleted scenes, and no commentary, so not much else to say on that one. The next one is going to be a break episode from the main wedding plot, and it's going to be a reappearance of Ray's arch nemesis from season 4. That's right, Peggy the Cookie Lady is back, and this time Allie is having a sleepover with her buddy, played by Ray's real-life daughter. Oh, this one's going to be fun to talk about, especially since we've learned a little bit more about Peggy in this episode, in the little implication there that adds to a lot of humor. Of course, Sleepover at Peggy's, episode 19. Till next time, guys.